Well, I still have a mug because I just got one from my buddy that says give yourself permission. And it has his face on the other side. He died several years ago. That has been the best advice. And then it was reinforced over and over through Anne Bogart, through, what I did, all the directors at Harvard, all the avant-garde I've done. I mean, and in painting, there is no wrong. There is no right or wrong. You have to, if you have the courage to fail, if you give yourself permission to fail, and this is in anything in life, something tremendous will happen. Something wonderful will happen if I give myself permission to fail every single day.
That was the voice of actor, painter, and autobiographical solo performance expert Alice Manning, and it is my absolute delight to have her on as the guest of this episode of the Page and Stage podcast, where we explore the art and craft of writing and performance. As always, I'm your host, Jason Cannon, and this week we dig deep into the importance of humor in family dynamics, the process of creating and performing solo shows, and the power of empathy and vulnerability to heal yourself and others. But before we get to all that, a brief Page and Stage plug. This podcast is only one part of my story coaching work. You can check out everything I'm up to over at pageandstage.art, including my other podcast, 100 Plays, as well as my weekly newsletter full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes. Again, that's pageandstage.art. Now, let me tell you a bit more about my awesome guest, Alice Manning. You can read her whole bio in the show notes, but I got to tell you, this conversation was a joy. Alice has been through things that most of us can't even imagine going through, and she has come through it with grace and joy and compassion that is beyond what most people seem capable of nowadays. She talks about her family. She talks about some of the landmines that exist in doing solo memoir work. We had a great conversation about all of her amazing work she does in the prisons. I'm even looking into becoming a volunteer myself because the work sounds so amazing. The power of a story, right? When you just ask someone to help you, to tell you about their life, man, it just opens them up. And Alice has seen this over and over firsthand, and you're going to hear all about it in our conversation. I will say we had a lot of fun too, because she had a painting that kept falling down on her head, and I had a backdrop that kept falling down on the floor. So even though this was the first time that we had a face-to-face conversation, it was like we'd known each other for years. And she's someone whose work I encourage you to check out, to go seek out. And if she inspires you the way she inspires me, this will be an hour well worth your time. Here we go with my conversation with Alice Manning. Okay, I am online with the one and only Alice Manning, and we were just laughing. This is like our fourth attempt to do this. The tech gremlins have just not been kind, and then as we even got you connected, you had a painting falling on your head. So we are set up for success here, Alice. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My whole life is about falling and getting up again.
Perfect. What a great segue. That's the way to do it.
Hopefully in a comic fashion.
So you're wearing a Harvard hoodie. Did you go to Harvard?
Yes and no.
Explain.
Well, I don't think I could have gotten into Harvard, but I auditioned for the very first year of the Institute for Advanced Theater Training at Harvard. So Bob Brustein went over to Harvard from Yale, developed a company there in a theater at Harvard called American Repertory Theater. And then years later, he said, hey, why don't I start a school? So I read about this and I auditioned for the first year, and they auditioned about 750 people all over the country, and they picked 10 actors. And so I did the first year of the program.
Wow.
It was spectacular. It's where I met Anne Bogart. I was in her first company. I met Andre Serban. I mean, all these amazing Eastern European directors. I starred in things at the Hasty Pudding.
Oh
It
man.
was a tremendous experience. And it was really, we called ourselves Just Add Water because we had to work things up so fast, so much avant garde stuff.
Yeah.
It was just a boot camp, amazing training. And then they asked me to teach at Harvard. So I ended up teaching for 5 years. They don't actually have, acting at Harvard. They used to have like a directing class or something. And so I taught there for 5 years in their huge summer program. So I taught kids from all over the world came
Wow,
and took the acting classes. That was
man.
tremendous also. But no, I would not have gotten into Harvard.
Dang you, SATs. So I got distracted by the hoodie, but as I was saying, doing a podcast like this, what's wonderful, even though we've had multiple now texts and emails of frustration at the gremlins of technology, this is our first time actually getting to talk. And I was introduced to you by David Sittler, who was a
Yes.
guest back in season one, who I've worked with here. I mean, wonderful, wonderful performer, and just such a true gentleman, true good human being. And he insisted I talk to you, so I feel very lucky that we finally connected.
Well, he's one of my very favorite people, and we were on tour on National Players Shakespeare Tour,
Right.
which I did between my second and third year of college, and that's how we met. And we traveled for an entire year. I think there was 12 of us or something, and we did everything. Like I hung lights, I was
Yep.
the strike manager. I mean, we did everything. It was phenomenal training,
Yeah. Tour
and
life. I had 3 years of TYA touring myself. You man, you learn everything.
we still all keep in touch, and we're having I think, I don't know what reunion this is, maybe 40, 45 a reunion, August 18th. We're all going to meet in DC, all of us. And
So you're saying we're all invited, right?
everybody, come on down.
I always like to start with my guest's origin story, right? Their storyteller origin story. You know, you talk to any actor, any writer, that they all have that moment where they're like, "This is what I have to do." So you've talked about going to college for it. So when did that theater bug bite you? How did Alice Manning get into storytelling?
Well, probably when I was two, because I had eight siblings, and like many actors, I had to find a way to get attention. And so I started being funny very early and would entertain people in the middle of the room doing imitations. And it just started then. Everybody in my family had a great sense of humor because we had to. In fact, a lot of great comedians come out of Cleveland because they have to have a sense of humor.
Oh, the dig on Ohio came early today.
No longer, because anybody who is there now, Cleveland's great now. It's the
Yeah,
greatest
yeah.
place. And my ex-husband people used to hear, used to say, Cleveland's on the up. Cleveland's a great place. And he's like, well, why did you move here then?
All right,
So
so you're
anyway,
a little kid, you're fighting for attention. Yeah.
I think like I did something in school, like where I had to do a song, and I did Athena, the goddess, singing to somebody else. Anything you can do, I can do better. I don't know. And it just hit me then. I was like, oh my God, this is fun. And then in seventh grade, somebody asked me to do Our Town for our church.
Oh
And so I
wow.
played Emily in Our Town. One of my brother's friends wasn't really a director, but he directed me in Our Town. And I had a tremendous experience doing that. And then I went to all girls Catholic school, and the nun who handled the drama department was tremendous. I mean, she was amazing. She went through the program in directing at Catholic University, where I ended up going, and she, trained me like a professional in high school. And she gave me all the leads and was hard on me and disciplined, and told me I should go to this school. And she said, "But don't expect to get any parts, but you should go there and train."
Sage advice. Great. I'm
I
gonna.
know she meant the rest of my life.
Right, right. All right, before I pivot into your solo work, because this is huge, the painting behind you, because that's another version of storytelling. You told me before we got on that that is you. It's a self-portrait. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That is you at what age?
I believe six. I was in kindergarten. So I think back then I was around six, 5 or 6. I think
You
six.
painted that when you were 6?
No, I painted it, I think last year.
Oh, okay, okay.
I use it as the poster for my most recent show called Manning's Madhouse.
Great.
So,
Painting's Madhouse. Great. So you painted your own show
yes,
art.
yes. And then
Awesome.
I use paintings that I've painted on stage with me. And
Throughout the
when I
show.
did the show, I started on stage as people were coming in. I was painting a portrait of my family,
Oh, okay.
came into the theater, and then
Was it the
start.
same painting? So this is like the half hour before show starts. Audience
Yeah,
is coming in, and you're on stage painting, right? So they're
yes.
watching this happen in real time. Did you work on one painting the whole run of the show? Did you finish one each performance?
No, I continually worked on one that I did of my family, me as a little girl with all my brothers and sisters, and I'm sitting there waving like this. I think I was like 3 or 4. And so I'm doing that in black and white. So I'm just very slowly working on it. So it's
Awesome.
still maybe only halfway done, but I have that on stage.
Okay. Very cool.
This on stage and then another one I painted. Yeah, so I have about 3 paintings on stage.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm going to
I
ask you to.
decided from now on I'm going to do incorporate paintings in my shows.
Okay, so this is the first thing I really want to dive into with you is that you are known for your autobiographical solo shows. You've done several of them. Your show Family Secrets, I believe. Am I getting this right? It's the longest running solo show in off Broadway history, or
Yeah.
something like that.
That was actually written. That's how I got started. That was actually written by Sherry Glazer, and I was living right next door to the West Side Arts Theater. I think it was West Side Arts on 43rd and Ninth, and I lived right next door on the fifth floor walk up, and I went over to see the show. And I sat there and I just got like this lightning bolt, and it just felt like that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And I
Wow.
remember seeing Whoopi Goldberg in her show, and I went to see the Universe one, the aliens, the she was on Laugh-In. What's her name again?
Oh,
Tomlin, Lily Tomlin.
Lily Tomlin. Yes, Lily Tomlin. Yep.
I went to see her show like 6 times and stood in the back and watched it. I just became captivated by this idea of the challenge of telling a story as different characters all alone on stage, but not alone. And I just couldn't shake it. And then years later, I met one of Sherry Glazer's like first director slash friend who directed her. I became friends with her somehow through another friend. And then I think she told me, or somebody told me, that Sherry didn't want to do the show anymore and was auditioning for somebody to do it. So I went in, auditioned, and got it. And then she didn't want to be traveling around the country doing it. And so I did it. And it was a tremendous experience, but it was just the synchronicity of it was wild, you know?
Yeah. So you started out then. So your first experience performing a solo show was someone else's autobiographical show.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then you had this lightning bolt moment. Did
Yeah.
performing that show did performing someone else's life, is that what kind of got you over the hump into writing your own? Then
Yes.
how did your first solo autobiographical show then come together?
Okay. And then I started doing it almost, it felt like almost out of necessity because I moved to California and I got married almost like a year after I moved here. And I started having kids because I was older and I wanted to, so I had one child, and I think I had started doing Family Secrets before that, and then she was like 10 months old when I was doing it. I remember her being with me in Philadelphia at
Wow.
10 months old and doing it, being there for like 4 months or something like that. And then I had another daughter a couple years later. I was, I wanted to be able to take care of them. So I was at home, and my husband had an office a few blocks away on Main Street and was starting his own like solar company, like just a boutique company. And so I really wanted to be, creative. And all I could do at the time was commercials because that was the easiest thing for me to do. Like he could watch the kids while I ran out and did a commercial audition, but I
Right.
couldn't really commit to trying to do anything else because I wanted to be there with my daughters. And so I would go to his office at night and I just started writing. And then I found out about this solo show writing class with Mark Travis. And so I would go to Studio City and take class with him. And I started writing the stories of my life. And I started with my sister who has schizophrenia, growing up with her. So that was my first thing. And then I started producing little evenings with someone of people doing doing stories, autobiographical stories. And yeah, that's how it got started, where I had to be creative. And so he would take care of the girls at night. I would go to his office and write.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So when it comes to these solo shows, Alice, because we're in kind of a time where there's multiple versions of this. There's stuff like Thurgood, which is one actor portraying a historical
Yeah.
figure, or Mark Twain, or Golda Meir, right? Golda's Balcony. It's an actor taking on a historical figure, right? There's
Yeah.
that version of the. Whoa. My backdrop just fell over. I'm not kidding. Your painting's been falling on you. My backdrop. Luckily, this. Oh my gosh. I'm just going to leave it down at this point.
Sorry. It's
At
my
this point,
influence. Sorry.
I'm leaving it down. So that's one version where the actor portrays the historical figure, right?
Yeah.
There's the
Yes.
version of something like I Am My Own Wife, where one actor portrays multiple characters, but it's still a fictional narrative, right?
Yeah.
And then there is this autobiographical version, right? And even now today, that autobiographical version is sort of marrying stand-up comedy. Like Mike Birbiglia comes to mind, or Hannah Gadsby, right? Very, very personalized, but very
Yeah.
much through the stand-up comedy lens, but they're also
Yeah.
blending true storytelling in. So I'm curious,
Yes.
for you, how has
Yes.
because you've done multiple solo shows, are they
Yeah.
all kind of spoken memoir? How do you like to lean into the theatricalization of them, or do you keep it pretty stripped down, you and a stool and a light? Like, what is the Alice Manning preferred
Okay.
methodology of creating and presenting these solo shows?
Well, they're very stripped down. I might just use a couple blocks and, lighting generally. Recently, I've gotten more into, video and stuff like that a little bit and putting my paintings on stage. But since I've always produced, written, and performed it, I keep it pretty simple because I really believe in just conveying the story is most important. And when I started working with Mark, he really drilled us on acting. I mean, doing the action, not explaining. So my method is almost all dialogue. So between me, characters, or whatever. So I'm doing, not explaining as much as possible. And I'm not commenting as much. I am going so deeply into the tragedy, though, that some things become very funny. So that's my method, is to just go as deep as I can into the tragedy, not commenting on it. And then I see what surfaces as funny. And it's kind of naturally evolved for me because that's how I've gotten through life, is going through the tragedy and then somehow laughing about it, or making it funny somehow, or
Yeah.
just pointing up through acting it out, the absurdity, the irony, the what is deeply tragic becomes deeply hilarious. And that's how I have progressed. And I just kind of surrendered to who I am as a person, and that's how I've gotten through life. So that's what I do in my show. And generally, people come out laughing. And I remember, and most of it, it involves deep tragedy. But I remember doing Stronger Than the Wind and people saying, "Oh my God, that was so tragic. I can't believe I laughed through that whole thing." But that's how I think people let things in. That's how I think people transform and can empathize and can relate and learn. So I feel like I've been on the right path in terms of that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Alice. I feel like the comedy is what lets us get close. The comedy
Yes.
makes it less threatening. The audience, they relax, they get close to you, and then once you got them
Yeah.
close, then you can
Yes.
stab them.
Yeah. My friend that did it one show with me, he said, "Yeah, I love the way you reel them in, you make them laugh, and then you punch them in the gut, and then you
Right.
make them laugh again, and then you punch them in the gut, and then you make them,
Oh my
so
gosh.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's a trick though that goes all the way back to Shakespeare, right? When you put a comedic scene next to a tragic scene, they both amplify because of the
yes,
sudden, dynamic shift between them.
hmm
The audiences love those sharp left turns. They love them.
yes, and that's like painting. I mean, everything intersects because painting, my wonderful painting teacher in France always talks about how you transform the color of something by putting a specific color next to it. And you
Yeah,
can't
yeah, yeah.
count on putting a color down because if you're putting something complementary next to it, it will change that color.
Yep. Complement and
It's
contrast, how they feed off each other. Yeah.
right. And
That's so
amplify
cool.
each other and enrich each other.
Did I hear you
So
say that
yeah,
you self-produce these shows?
yes, yeah.
Do you have like a
For the most,
company or like do you rent a
not
theater? Do you have
always.
partners?
Occasionally, like when I did Stronger Than the Wind, it was kind of more word of mouth. Like I had a friend of mine who ran Boston University's theater department brought me to the theater he was the artistic director for called New Rep in Boston. So he brought me there and I did the show there for several weeks and stuff like that. I go different place. Like I was brought somebody I do the prison project brought me to Paul Newman's camp for kids in Vale, and she did a huge fundraiser for the camp. And she had a mansion on the Ridge in Vale, and she brought me there. She created a theater in her garage and
Whoa.
rented seats, a stage, lighting, and I performed for this big fundraiser for Paul Newman Camp for Kids. I mean, so I've done stuff like that. I went to this, I don't know, 200-year-old theater in Bakersfield. The woman who owned it brought me there and did it for that community. So it's been very word of mouth because I have four kids, one special needs child, and I don't have the bandwidth to, you know,
Yeah.
do anything than mostly create it. Then my nephew brought me to Cleveland and he produced it there with my brother. So that's how it's been working.
Very cool. No, that's so cool. And that's another reason to keep it so stripped down so you can play a variety of flexible
I can do
spaces.
it anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're writing, I'm sticking pins in a lot of things you've said, so I'm going to come back. But I wanted to ask that, and this might come from your training with Mark Travis too. As you're writing and rehearsing and creating these solo shows, you've done what, like half a dozen of them at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably.
that's a lot. So, question one, I think a lot of people get confused about biography or memoir. They think once you've done one that, you're done. But you are
Mm.
telling the story of your life in multiple ways from multiple angles, and maybe you focus on this theme or on this 2 year period, but we each have. Whenever I teach memoir, I'm always telling everyone, stop trying to jam your whole life into one piece of work. It's better to write 6 memoirs than one. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
when you are creating these, how do you decide what to focus on each time? You mentioned that a lot of it comes from tragedy, or so it's the classic question: what inspires you each time you start a new show?
Well, first of all, I feel like I've had so much trauma in my life. I probably have like five lifetimes worth of shows.
Show number 77.
And um, so the first one, well, not the first one. Well, I think when I started in therapy, first of all, which was when I was at Harvard, I started realizing that writing was going to be healing for me. And having the courage to put it out there was also going to be healing for me. And so that was my initial intention. I am going to do this to heal this trauma so that I can be a more functioning, healthy person and I can function as a good mother. And I just early on saw that as my trajectory was healing myself. And so I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it really has been tremendous in that way.
Great. So it's always starting from a point of what's the next thing I need to grapple with, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The first one I did was about my sister with schizophrenia. And I think I gravitated towards that because I felt it was a very, very deep story and one that many people can relate to, but no one talks about. And when I was growing up, people didn't talk about it. We had to fight like hell to get my parents to, kind of acknowledge what was going on. We had to have meetings behind their back to try to get her help. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And so I think it was twofold there where I was like, I'm going to use my gifts for the greater good by making myself vulnerable, putting myself out there, and hopefully helping others to see that they're not alone, that I understand what they're going through, and I know they can understand what I've been through. And hopefully it will be healing for them as well. And it's definitely been healing for me. So that was
Yeah.
my original intention, and it's pretty much stayed the same, you
Yeah.
know?
In terms of healing for the audience, because a lot of the work I've done recently has been in the mental health field too, working with actors,
Oh,
shows that are addressing these things, and
wow.
every performance includes a talkback. And I'm wondering if in terms of as you heal yourself, the offering to the audience is, I loved what you said, you're not alone, right? Do you engage, like you even said you did it for kids, right? Do you engage with the audience afterwards? Is there work after the performance is finished in terms of healing both for yourself and for the audience that is part of you? Because your personal mission, which I love, I read this in an interview, your personal mission is look inside the soul. And that's not just your
Yes.
soul, that's the audience's soul,
Right.
if I'm hearing you right. So
Yes.
I'm curious how that looks for you logistically.
Yeah. So, yes, I have done many talkbacks. And I feel like my favorite ones were maybe in Boston when I did it. And as a result of that, I've had a lot of people come up to me and talk about their stories, and, say, wow, I went through this with, blah, blah, or whatever. And that's been extremely rewarding. When I was doing Stronger Than the Wind about my son having the stroke and being in the neonatal intensive care unit, there was a woman sitting behind my husband that kept tapping him on the shoulder saying, tell your wife thank you, tell your wife thank you. Tell your wife, he's telling all of our story. Tell your wife thank you. And I've heard that a lot. You're telling all of our stories. And that is the most rewarding thing I could hear. And I do hear that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing, Alice. I see this with early career writers or writers just starting out all the time, that they think they have to tell everyone's story. When in fact, when you just
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
yours, we
Yes.
listen autobiographically, right? The audience will hear their story if you tell yours.
Yeah.
But as soon as you try to tell
Yes.
everyone's, you leave specificity behind, you get general, and then you fall into the
Right.
classic traps of these solo shows, which is navel gazing, or to your point,
Right.
explaining instead of
Right.
doing the
Right.
action. Yeah.
Right, right. And yeah, I'm really careful about that. Going, I had a lot of sexual assault and stuff like that. And I'm just very careful about not like, you know, going like super deep into it, acting it out, like, I mean, it's really off putting, People can fill in, it's like a painting. Once again, you
Yeah.
don't need to do every inch of it. You need to allow the people their own process to fill it in, to have the satisfaction of discovering for themselves, you know. And so it's similar to painting in that way, where I can allow them to fill in, because as they're filling in, they're also filling in their own lives. They're also
Right.
filling in their own perspective, you know. So yeah, I don't know if I answered. I don't remember what the question was.
I don't know that there was a question. I was just kind of like jamming. It's like I get so excited about this stuff. I geek out. So talk about whether it's from something you learned from Mark or something you've learned doing all these shows. What are some of the big traps or landmines that you would warn someone out there listening who might be interested in doing their own solo show? What's something you would encourage them to do, and what's something you would warn them against?
Okay. Well, one thing I have always kind of struggled with is who wants to hear this? Like, does anybody, I go through this every time where I'm about to
Imposter
do it. I'm
syndrome. Oh my God. Yep.
going, wait a minute. Who wants to hear this? Who wants to hear my story? What? Why am I doing this? It's creating such stress and agita, and, like, who wants to hear this? Well, that's number one. Screw that idea. Okay. Just do it. Number two, as we all know, the more specific you can be, the more universal it becomes. And I've seen that play out over and over and over. And that's what I have to tell myself over and over. No, the more specific you are, because I keep going, that little devil on my shoulder says,
Yeah.
nobody wants to hear that detail. Nobody wants to hear that, you know, and that's not true. So that's another thing. And the other thing is, I love going to shows. I love going to solo shows, because even if I don't feel it's up to snuff, I always learn something. Even if it's what I don't want to do, I'm still learning something. And sometimes it's that that doesn't work well doing it that way, or that's not hitting me right as an audience member. It's really, I think I've really released my ego, but I think that happened years ago as a child in a bad way. So I feel like when I'm doing things, it's more out of, challenging myself, generosity, and healing, And I realized a long time ago that if I focus on healing myself, a byproduct just might be healing others, but I can't expect that. I can't count on that. But I think it's, why am I doing this? If
Yeah.
I'm doing this to show off, to, be a victim, to whatever it is, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe that's where people go wrong sometimes.
Yeah, I just took a memoir writing class back in January with Julie Metz, New York Times bestselling author. She came down to this class, and one of the things she
Wow.
said is, she said, if you're writing your memoir because you have an axe to grind, no one wants to read that. But
Right.
you need a little
Right.
bit of
Right.
that emotional and narrative distance from the thing, right? The classic
Yeah.
that comedy is tragedy plus time, right? We need that distance, that perspective. And based on how
Yes.
long ago the thing happened, our perspective shifts. I'm wondering if you've brought up actually the same event in multiple shows, but seen it differently because you've gotten further away from it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am going to do, I think this year, Stronger Than the Wind, which I started working on 18 years ago. And I think I'm going to resurrect that and redo it from my new self.
Yeah.
And I've changed a lot. And so I'm very excited about that. The main thing that I have learned to do is one of the main things is, as you said, nobody wants to watch you be a victim or accusatory and so forth. And what I have found is all I have to do is tell my story. And people come to their own conclusions. They come to their own decisions about whether that was right or wrong. And sometimes it's very difficult. I had a very difficult time with Stronger Than the Wind because I had just come off of, like 2 years earlier, I had twins and they were born early and they were in the neonatal intensive care unit. And one of them contracted bacteria from the hospital. And they didn't tell us about the bacteria. And he had a massive stroke and 6 brain surgeries. And, he was in a coma for 3 weeks and he almost died several times. And then he came home with cerebral palsy, paralysis on one side of his body, extreme cognitive impairment because it fried the left side of his brain, and a seizure disorder. He's downstairs, 22 years old. He is pure love and an incredible blessing. But I had decided to write the show for my own healing, even though the anger I felt and actually still feel about what the hospital did and took zero responsibility for, and that our entire lives have revolved around healthcare because we lost everything. We lost our healthcare, and it's been 22 years of constant struggle, thousands of hours of me on the phone trying to negotiate care for him through the healthcare system, trying to negotiate his education, and everything, trying to get him help, trying to get him assistance while I'm trying to do everything else because I have 3 other kids.
Right.
So, but I did that show not in that vein. I just told the story. And people were alarmed. They felt compassion. They felt empathy. They felt every emotion watching that show. But it wasn't because I commented on it. I
Right.
just told the story.
You didn't
I
tell
just
them what
act,
to think. Yeah. Yeah.
I just acted the story.
Yeah.
And so there's no one who could say, "Oh, you're being this or you're being part." No, I just acted the story.
So I can only imagine. He said so 18 years ago he would have been 4, right? So the first version of this
Yes.
would be you 18 years younger with a 4-year-old and retelling it today. 18 years later, he's now 22. You have all these years now of other experience that will, I'm
Yes.
sure, and also emotional clarity that will have to come into a new performance and probably result in some script changes and everything else. But even just the new depth of your experience will have to impact how that show comes across.
Yes. Yes. And to be honest, I think I will be a little more courageous
Oh,
in terms
talk
of,
about that. Yeah. Courageous
because I was
how?
so
Yeah.
scared. I was very scared at the time because our pediatrician had said to us, "I've never said this to anybody, but you must sue the hospital." And so during that time, we had a lawsuit, and it was like David and Goliath, and HIPAA had just been enacted, and our attorney dropped our case because felt he couldn't get past the motion to dismiss. And I was expected to find another parent that was in the NICU who also had the bacteria. I was expected to surreptitiously get their records to prove that it was the same bacteria that affected my son. And of course, I was so overwhelmed. All I could do was cry all the time, pray. I was trying to really work on healing, visualizing, meditating. I sought out healers all over the world, and I did not want to be in that mode, that vibration of, revenge, or I'm suing you. So I just felt like, okay, if they're going to do it and I don't have to be actively involved, fine. But they did actively involve me. And I could not pick up the phone and call these people without sobbing. I mean, it would take me 3 months to pick up the phone. And then I would call somebody, and then she would be traumatized, another parent, and she'd say, I can't talk about this because when I was in the neonatal intensive care unit, they made me pry a dead baby out of this woman's hand whose baby died, and she was holding the baby and wouldn't let it go. And they asked this woman to pry the baby out of this woman's hand. So she couldn't talk to me. It was like that. It was so horrifying. And so that was still going on, or maybe it was over at that point. So, but I was afraid of, like, oh my God, they're going to sue me. I was just afraid. And one thing I said during the show was I would do the doctor, or I would do the attorney or whatever. And I would say, oh, I forgot. I'm supposed to be an attorney. Oh, I forgot. I'm supposed to be a doctor. Because everything coming at me, I had to somehow decipher, act upon, make decisions, and synthesize as though I were a professional. It just felt like that all the time. And I, would do my best trying to figure out everything. It was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And while I was going through it, I just knew then I was going to do a show about it. And this is where the comedy comes in, where I was walking down the hallway of the hospital in the NICU, pushing a huge breast pump in a stroller and thinking to myself, I could barely walk, like I was so tired, because I would have to go in a room and pump milk for twins. And I was there all the time. And I would just think to myself, oh, this is going to be really funny in my show. And that's how I would get through everything.
Wow.
Rather than just sobbing walking down the hall, I was looking from above, commenting on it. Oh man, that's going to be really funny.
Wow.
Weird as that sounds, that's what I had to do
Well, it almost sounds like it
for
was a
myself.
very specific coping mechanism at the time that then also bore the fruit of an actual performance, and now is going to, again, be a performance where you have even more reflective power on it. Speaking of, because
Yeah.
I read this too, that you are in the process of filming your shows. And this is important because I'm sure a lot of my listeners will want to check out your work, but of course, it's how are we going to be able to see a live show, right? But if you're going to film them, what is the timeline like that for? And also, how are you approaching that process? Capturing a theatrical experience on film is tricky at best. So are you
Hmm.
restaging? Are you bringing in an outside camera crew? Like, kind of, what is your process going to be? And then also for the listeners, like, when can we find you on Amazon Prime or whatever?
Well, I just did this for the first time at my last show, which was April 12th. So I know it's really hard to film things with stage lighting, really hard.
Yeah.
So I did my show in the solo festival at the Whitefire Theater in Los Angeles. And they have a guy they use who will film the show, and then they live stream the shows if you so desire.
Oh
And
wow.
they split the take on that for if you're live streaming. Well, I decided not to do that because I've been working with my nephew, who is amazing, and he has his own company called Your Story on Film. He loves documentary stuff, and he started doing, films of, like, somebody in your grandfather or something, and he did this amazing thing on my grandfather. And then he branched out and he just did a film called Toxic for a nonprofit in Cleveland about Black women trying to navigate the healthcare system during pregnancy. And because there's a very high mortality rate. And So really cooking with gas, like doing all this stuff. And so I started working with him at a discount. And okay. And so we're coming up, he's helping coach me actually. So he came up with this idea of how do we monetize what you do, what you've been doing for years.
Wow.
And yeah, different organizations, hospitals, and each one of my shows is a different kind of cause, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
Stronger Than the Wind, probably primarily our healthcare system, and the flaws and the tragedies and so forth. And Manning's Madhouse could be seen as mostly about mental illness, dysfunctional family, that kind of thing. So I had Manning's Madhouse filmed and I just saw it and I think it was pretty good. We did two cameras, two camera operators, and then he did testimonials afterwards, which came out great. He worked during my tech, um, for the solo festival, you have to tech that day and then do your performance.
Yeah,
So
you get like 20 minutes.
it's, yeah, just add water, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I have a lot of experience in that. And so he basically worked with the tech director and just said, hey, would you mind if the lights were a little lighter here, a little higher here? Is that okay with you, Alice? So that's how we did it. We just pretty much did it the same and maybe adjusted the lights a little brighter
Yeah.
in places where they might have been very dark. And I think it, you know, stage lights aren't real flattering on your face, but I think it came out fine, pretty well.
Great.
So
Will this
that
be
was our
available
first.
to download somewhere then?
Eventually,
Okay.
probably. I'm having a little internal issues with it because my family doesn't know I'm doing it.
Ooh.
So
Where's
don't
the
tell them.
courageousness? Come on, come on.
At the beginning of the show, I have this in the dark. I'm doing this prayer, like this really new agey woo woo prayer, and I say, well, one of the things I say is, and spirit, I want everybody's higher self to be here, and then I say. I want my higher self to be higher than everyone else's higher self, but not so much higher that they know that my higher self is higher than theirs. And then at the end, I just say, and please, God, don't let my family in Cleveland find out I'm doing this.
So, yeah. Well, just, don't give him the password.
So I don't know how much of it I will actually use with him.
Yeah.
I don't know yet because I think most of it they would absolutely love. But there's a few things in there that they won't like a
Yeah.
lot.
That's one of the bugaboos with memoir work, right? Is that you have to kind of go get permission or just have the thick enough skin to say, this is my version of events and yours can be different. But that is something I come up against a lot. People
Right.
worried about how's my
Oh,
sister, how's my
yep.
mom, how are they going to feel about this?
Yep. No, and it's my story. I have a right to tell my story. So, but that's why I moved 2,000 miles away.
I mean, this is also great. I want to ask you though, because one of your amazing projects you work on is called Freedom to Choose. You go into prisons
Right.
and do psychology workshops, like in 9 different prisons. And then I read an interview with you, and you said something to the effect that this work has been better counseling for you in prison. That these prisoners counsel you better than all your years of therapy. So I'm curious. I'm just kind of giving you an on ramp for the next few minutes. What is this program? How'd you get
Okay.
started? What do you do? And
Okay.
why is it so impactful?
Okay. So part of my healing was seeking out, all types of healing for myself through writing, performing. And I was seeking out healing for my son. And I found out about this healer in Brazil that I took my son to. And when I was there, the people I was with were talking about this graduate school called University of Santa Monica. And it was all spiritual psychology. And it just sounded great. And so I went back home and I looked it up and I ended up going there and it was a 2 year program and it's called spiritual psychology, which is in a nutshell taking whatever your spiritual orientation is and then bringing psychology into it. So you're learning skills like heart centered listening, taking personal responsibility. But in the process, you're doing it in a trio where somebody is asking you questions and you're answering them, coming to your own aha moments, your own internal transformation experientially. And it's very much like theater in that way. And then as you're doing that, you are invoking Buddha or whatever your own spiritual orientation is into the work and asking for assistance from whatever that higher power is for you, whatever, even if it's energy, the wisdom of your heart, and that's how it works. And the healing has been phenomenal for myself and everyone I have met in prison, so much so that the recidivism rate is going down. We're getting data now that people are coming out of our program after having done it for, we'll go into we're in like 9 prisons in California. We'll go in like twice a year and do two-day full workshops. I now facilitate, uh, we'll have a team of 2 people with another person. I'll facilitate the whole workshop of anywhere 100 to 250 inmates. And we'll bring in anywhere from 30 to 80 volunteers that sit in trio with the inmates. They listen to our story, our whatever it is, our issue, our problem. They counsel us, just following along on a sheet. Then we switch positions. We'll switch to neutral observer who just sits and listens. Then we'll switch to the facilitator who reads the questions and the person answers the questions. And once we share, they are completely blown away that we're these people from the street coming in, sharing their very personal issue with them, trusting them to help us, treating us as though we are on the same level, not better than them, not worse than them, the same level. And then when they get in the share chair, they feel free to really open up. We've had people who haven't cried in 20 years, sometimes 30 years. And the work is almost magical. It's very sacred work. And we have guidelines like, what happens here stays here, you know. This is Vegas and different, about people, taking care of each other. And one of our main things is not telling somebody what to do. So some of them, for the first time, like we had women just stunned because they had never had a man sit across from them and be kind to them. Many of these women have suffered tremendous abuse. They've told me at least 90% of the women have been abused in prison or, in prison and out of prison. And so that's in a nutshell what we do. We're finding it works anywhere. I did a workshop with juvies in Cleveland, or I'm going to do actually one there. I did one in just a middle school. It works everywhere. And the beauty of this is, and the thing that can transform the world is simply one word: empathy.
Yeah.
And to me, it's the one thing we need right now. And it doesn't happen from telling people what to do, from chastising them for their beliefs, or anything else. It comes from sitting across from somebody and sharing yourself and promoting empathy. And that's it.
That's amazing. Yeah, from that one thing. And to go in, I can only imagine the resistance of someone like incarcerated, and here comes this group to come save me or help me, and
Yeah.
just you sit down and just say, hey,
These
can you, and you ask
people,
them for help. You ask them for help, and how that immediately humanizes and lifts them.
Yeah.
It's very similar to what you're
Yeah.
doing, what you said with your show, right? I'm just going to tell my story,
Yeah.
and then someone else feels empowered to tell theirs.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the beauty of theater. Oh, and I'm about to go down to DC in a week, and I'm teaching an acting intensive at something called Young Artists of America with my best friend from college, and another a team of people, and she is bringing me down to teach viewpoints because I worked with Anne Bogart and general acting, monologue work, and um, I'm also going to bring in some heart centered work as well. And so I'm thinking, we're thinking about creating the whole person. What do we want these high school kids to go away with? How do we help them be the whole person, not just focusing on how do I act this monologue or whatever it is? And what we want to bring is not through being didactic in any way, but experientially, what we want to bring is the idea of empathy. We are all one. We are listening. We are hearing. And then you launch from there. But if,
Mm-hmm.
if we can just help ground them in the possibility that there can be empathy, harmony, justice in this world, and that they can use their little corner to insist upon it, that's the
Yeah.
best we can do.
Yeah.
And that's what I determined for myself. I'm not going to get overwhelmed. I'm not going to be depressed, discouraged, disheartened, because that's what certain people want me to do. I'm going to stay in my little corner, and I'm going to create the brightest light that I can. And I truly believe that that's how we overcome the darkness.
Man, mic drop. That was great, Alice. Thank you. We could keep going, I know, but we're almost at time here, so I'm going to switch to the wrap, which is always a spotlight. And so I sent you a couple questions. I'm just going to run through those. And the first one is, if you could ask any one person any one question, who would that person be, and what would you ask them?
Can it be somebody political?
Sure.
Or do you want me somebody Twitter? Okay.
Courageous.
Well, I just, you know, because of what's happening in LA right now, which is people being allies for the people that are being persecuted and have no voice. My I'm really thinking a lot about this, and I'm, I know people have gone to the protests, and I'm going to do a protest on June 14th. And I was thinking, I have a huge canvas on my wall that I was going to use for a show I'm doing about prison. And I decided, no, I'm going to make a sign for this No Kings protest I'm going to. And so I was ruminating on what is the sign going to say? And I thought, oh, I'd have a picture of Trump with mashed potatoes on his head, or the emperor has no clothes. And then I thought, how is that going to help get through to anyone who I want to get through to? And so this morning, I thought, who do I most want to get through to? Well, the architect of ICE coming in and arresting people that aren't criminals, that are hardworking people, their families, their children, separating them. And that would be Stephen Miller, who actually went to Santa Monica High School, where I live. And I'm going to write a sign to him saying, Dear Stephen, your hometown really, really wants you to heal your heart so you can stop hurting others. And that's what I'm going to write on my sign, as wimpy as that may seem to some people. That's what I feel. I mean, I look at someone like that and I say, your heart is in so much pain. I want your heart to heal so that you will stop hurting yourself and others.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the crux of everything. And I guess that wasn't a question. That
It
wasn't a
begs the
question,
it
but
begs the
how
question,
about
but yeah,
Stephen? Can
that's
you
great.
go to therapy? Can you go to therapy? Can you try to heal your heart,
Yeah,
Stephen?
yeah.
Can you heal
Come to
your heart, Stephen, so you stop hurting everyone
yeah,
else?
yeah.
And I would say
There's
the same thing to Trump.
there's a level of compassion in there that I wouldn't call wimpy in a way that takes as much courage or strength as I mean we need it. Any sort of large change requires vectors from multiple points of view and multiple angles, right? There's no one right
Hmm.
way to do it. That's for sure. I'm going to kind of
Yeah.
ask you the second question and answer it for you because again, I read it in an interview and I think it's a great answer. So typically, I ask, "What is the best advice you've ever taken?" In one of your interviews, I saw that you quoted Bill Graham Sr. from Catholic University in the theater
Yep.
department that he told you
That's
give
it.
yourself permission.
Yep.
And that feels like
Yep.
the best advice you've ever taken. And so I'm curious what that
Yep.
story is and what that advice means to you.
Well, I still have a mug because I just got one from my buddy that says give yourself permission, and it has his face on the other side. He died several years ago. That has been the best advice. And then it was reinforced over and over through Anne Bogart, through, what I did, all the directors at Harvard, all the avant-garde I've done. I mean, and in painting, there is no wrong. There is no right or wrong. You have to, if you have the courage to fail, if you give yourself permission to fail, and this is in anything in life, something tremendous will happen. Something wonderful will happen if I give myself permission to fail every single day. And the other thing that Bill Graham said to me was, he said, he pulled me into his office because he said I wasn't breathing. And it was because I had a lot of trauma. And he worked, held my diaphragm and said, I want you to breathe. And he said, I want you to stop. I'm going to cry. I want you to stop worrying about what people are thinking of you. Because don't flatter yourself, Alice. They're not.
Oh, that's so good.
And that was equally as important for me to hear that.
Yeah.
Don't flatter yourself, Alice. They're not thinking about you. And if they
Yeah.
were, of course, it doesn't matter.
Right. Right. Oh my goodness. Alice, thank you so much for all of this. I just want to finish here with the final spotlight is listeners who want to check out more, learn more about you, learn more about your programs or what you're up to, maybe catch your show somewhere. Where can they come learn more about Alice or follow you or contact you?
Okay, alicemanning.com. That's where I have everything. I working on my bandwidth expansion to get my Instagram going better. But right now it's alicemanning.com. I would love a booking agent
Anyone out there
to help me
listening?
get my shows out there so I don't have to, pull the truck myself
Right, right.
through the streets.
Your U-Haul buy 10 get one free card is all filled up. Great. AliceManning.com. Everyone, I will put a direct link in the show notes to that. Alice, as things evolve, once you have like live links or whatever, send those to me and I'll send an update to everybody. But just thank you so much for sharing these stories and your honesty and vulnerability. Just truly appreciate it.
Jason, you are tremendous. Thank you. You're just amazing. Thank you. I could talk to you forever. I'm not kidding.
You've been listening to the Page and Stage podcast. All my thanks to this week's guest and to all of you out there for listening. You can learn more about all my guests and access their websites and projects in the show notes. If you enjoyed or found value in this podcast, I'd like to ask a quick favor. Leaving a short review or comment helps me out a ton. It tells the algorithmic overlords that people are listening, and it helps other folks discover the show. So if you can post a review over at Apple Podcasts, and I've left a link and easy instructions in the show notes, or leave a comment on this episode on Substack or YouTube, wherever you happen to be listening or watching, I would be incredibly grateful. Plus, I do my absolute best to respond to every comment. Let's get into a fun conversation. I use an incredible online app, riverside.fm, to produce this podcast. If you are interested in creating your own podcast or other audio or video content, I cannot recommend them highly enough. I left a link in the show notes so you can check them out for yourself. Both of my podcasts live over at pageandstage.art. And if you visit, you can even sign up for free to receive every future episode right into your inbox, as well as my weekly newsletter full of tips, tricks, inspiration, and encouragement for storytellers of all stripes. Again, that's pageandstage.art. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Cannon, and I cannot wait to hear your story.